Montana Territory, August 1877. The first time Dawson Lark saw her, she was kneeling in the dirt beside a grave, talking to the air like someone was answering her back. It was near sundown, the shadows long over the prairie, and the wind tugging at her faded blue dress. Her voice carried soft, kind of wistful, and though there was no one around, she smiled like someone she loved was sitting right there next to her. "Do you think the wheat will come in this year? I tried planting like you showed me. Dug deep. Watered careful." Dawson slowed his horse, boots creaking as he dismounted. He had been riding through the valley north of Helena, headed toward a ranch job he was not sure he wanted. He had seen her homestead from the ridge, small house, one barn, a few chickens pecking by the fence. She did not notice him at first, just kept talking to the grave like it was answering her. "I miss your laugh most of all, you know. Even when you were mad, you still laughed first." He cleared his throat quietly as he stepped closer. "Ma'am," she turned sharp, hand flying to her chest. Her eyes were wide but not scared, just startled, a little worn around the edges like she had not slept right in a while. "Sorry," Dawson said, tugging his hat off. "Didn't mean to sneak up. I was riding by, saw the place, thought maybe someone lived here." "I do," she said, "and my husband." "Though he is buried now," Dawson nodded slow. "I figured." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. Her hair was tied back loose, strands blowing in the wind. "My name's Verena Vaughn, Dawson Lark," he said. "You doing all right out here on your own?" Her mouth lifted at one corner. "They say I am crazy for talking to him." "I heard you," Dawson said. "Did not sound crazy to me." Verena studied him for a long moment like she was deciding something, then she pointed to the grave. "His name was Levy. We built this place together. He died last winter." "Fever, I'm sorry." "I talked to him because I miss him," she said simply, "and because sometimes I do not know what else to do." Dawson looked around. The land was dry but good. The barn roof sagged. The chicken coop needed mending, but the fence line was strong and the cabin had heart to it. "You got anyone helping?" he asked. "No, just me and my children." At that, two small faces peeked from the cabin doorway, a boy and a girl, both under 10. The boy held the girl's hand tight. "That's Daisy and Declan," Verena said. "They do what they can, but I will not put a child behind a plow." Dawson looked at her again. She stood straight, chin up, no apology in her expression. "Place like this, it should not fall apart," he said. She blinked at him. "You offering to help?" "I am," Dawson said. "If you will have me," Verena hesitated. "I cannot pay you." "I do not need paying," he said. "Just something to eat, a dry place to sleep, and maybe a chance to make myself useful." She looked at him a long time. "All right." That night, Dawson slept in the barn. He had laid out his bedroll beneath the loft and watched the rafters turn gold in the moonlight. He heard the wind through the cracks in the walls and the faint sound of Verena's voice drifting from the porch as she sat beside her husband's grave. "I do not know why he came," she said. "But he seems kind." Dawson closed his eyes. By morning, he had fixed the broken hinge on the chicken coop and patched the worst of the barn roof. When Verena stepped out with a kettle of coffee, she paused and stared at the roof like it was something she had forgotten could be whole. "You are quick," she said. "Just old habits," Dawson replied. They worked side by side for the next few days. He taught Declan how to brace a fence post. He showed Daisy how to collect eggs without scaring the hens. Verena watched him with quiet eyes, always cautious, always polite. But Dawson caught her smiling once, just a flicker, when he lifted Daisy onto the fence rail and she clapped her hands in delight. Each night Verena sat by the grave, and each night Dawson listened from the barn. "I think he is lonely too," she said once. "I see it when he talks to the children. Like someone left a hole in his chest." Dawson did not deny it. He had not spoken of his past, not yet. But he had felt it, that ache of wanting something solid, something warm, something to come home to. One afternoon, the storm rolled in without warning. Clouds thick and dark, wind sharp as a blade. The sky cracked open with thunder, and Dawson ran to the barn just in time to see the hayloft catch fire from a lightning strike. Verena was still in the house. "Watch the children," Dawson shouted to Declan as he raced through the rain. The roof was aflame, heat blistering. He burst through the door. Verena was trying to pull a chest from the firelit corner. She looked up, coughing. "Leave it," Dawson shouted. He grabbed her arm and pulled her out just as the ceiling gave way. They fell into the dirt outside, soaked and shaking. Dawson held her as the barn burned behind them, feeling the tremble in her shoulders, the way she clung to him without thinking. Later, after the rain had tamped the fire and the sky had cleared, they sat beneath the porch roof, wrapped in a blanket. The children slept inside. "You saved me," Verena whispered. "You would have done the same," Dawson said. She turned her head, looked up at him. "You are not like other men," he met her gaze. "You talk to your husband every night. I do not think you are crazy. That count for something," she smiled, small and real. "Yes." "It does." He reached for her hand and she let him. From then on, she started talking less to the grave and more to Dawson, and he listened. Always. Because somehow, in the quiet of the prairie, between grief and firelight, he had started to fall in love with the woman who talked to ghosts but smiled like the sun when she looked at him. The morning after the fire, Dawson rose before the sun and began clearing what was left of the barn. The wood was still warm in places, the air thick with the scent of char. He worked quiet, sleeves rolled, hands blackened with soot. Verena stepped outside just as he was hauling what remained of the loft ladder to the burn pile. "You don't have to do that today," she said. He didn't look up. "I do." She came closer, her boots brushing ash. "I was going to rebuild it this fall, thought I'd trade for some lumber down in Canyon Creek. I'll ride out there tomorrow," Dawson said. "You'll need a load wagon." She hesitated. "It's a long ride. I've made longer." Verena walked to the stump where the old feed barrel once sat and lowered herself onto it. Her hands were folded in her lap, stained with the same soot that darkened Dawson's palms. "You ever build a barn from scratch?" she asked. He nodded. "Once. In Kansas. Took me a month and a half. Worked from sunup till my hands bled." "What happened to it?" "Burned in a Comanche raid." She glanced at him, eyes steady. "You lose anyone?" "My sister." His voice didn't waver. "She was 16. Verena didn't speak for a while. The wind stirred the ashes like snow. Then she said, "I was 17 when I married Levy. My pa said I was too young to know my own mind." Dawson leaned on the broken yoke. "Did you?" "No," she said, a quiet laugh in her throat, "but I knew I loved him." That was enough. He met her gaze for the first time that morning. Seems like it still is. That night, Verena didn't sit by the grave. She stood in the kitchen, sleeves pushed up, kneading bread dough with a rhythm that matched the ticking of the mantel clock. Dawson sat near the hearth, sharpening a drawknife. Declan and Daisy were curled on the floor, heads pressed together over a wooden puzzle Dawson had carved from scrap last week. "You sure the children should be playing with your tools?" Verena asked, watching Daisy twist a piece into place. "It's not sharp," Dawson said, "and they're smart enough not to chew on it." "I suppose that's true," she said, brushing flour from her cheek. He watched her work. The flour dusted her hairline, made her look softer somehow, though her hands moved with certainty. "You always make bread by feel?" he asked. "Always. Levy liked it that way. He said it tasted like the land." Dawson studied the fire. "You ever think about leaving?" She paused, hands deep in the dough. "Sometimes, in winter mostly. When the stove runs low and the wind sounds like it's hunting something." "And what makes you stay?" She dusted the counter, gathered the dough into a neat round. "The children, this land, the fact that I've already given it everything. Seems wrong to walk away now." He nodded, then stood and crossed to the door. "I'll check the paddock before bed." The lantern on the porch cast a low circle of light. Dawson stood beneath it, the air cool and sharp with pine. Behind him, the door creaked open. Verena stepped out, her shawl drawn tight. "You didn't ask what I was trying to save from the barn," she said. He turned to her, his face unreadable. "Didn't think it was my place." "It was a box of letters, from Levy. He wrote them while we courted. I kept them in a cedar chest." "Did they burn?" She nodded. "Everyone." Dawson looked out into the dark. "I'm sorry." "I'm not," she said. "I remember every word." He stepped down into the yard, the grass cool under his boots. "You ever write him back?" "No," she said. "He said he liked hearing my voice more than reading my words." Dawson turned, voice low. "I think I'd like both." She looked at him then, not with sorrow or duty, but something new, something uncertain but not afraid. "I don't know what to do with you," she said. "You don't have to do anything," he replied. "Just let me stay." She didn't say yes. but she didn't go back inside either. They stood there a long time, the prairie stretching quiet around them and the wind lifting the scent of rising bread through the night. By the second week of September, the air sharpened. The wheat fields browned with promise, and mornings arrived wrapped in a chill that clung to the skin until the sun burned it off. Dawson rose early, hitching the wagon for the trip to Canyon Creek. Verena handed him a list of lumber and nails written in careful script on a scrap of ledger paper. "You'll need to deal with Mr. Talbert. He runs the yard," she said, tightening the knot of her kerchief. "He's competent, but he doesn't trust strangers." "Neither do I," Dawson said, folding the paper and slipping it into his coat. Verena handed him a tin wrapped in cloth. "Bread and ham. Daisy helped." He took it with a quiet nod, then looked beyond her toward the house. "Declan'll be all right helping you today. He's strong enough to carry feed and gentle enough to let Daisy lead." Dawson hesitated before climbing up. "You need anything else while I'm there?" She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, eyes fixed on the wagon bed. "No. Just come back before dark." He tipped his hat and the horses moved forward. Canyon Creek sat a half-day's ride southeast, nestled between cottonwoods and the slow bend of the creek that gave it a name. Dawson reached it near noon, the sun high and bright. He kept his hat low and his words fewer, enough to strike the deal and load the wagon. Talbert didn't ask questions, just counted nails like they were gold and grunted when Dawson handed over the last of Verena's coin. The road back wound through dry pasture and low hills. Dawson stopped once to check a loose strap and again when his horse caught a stone. He didn't return until after sunset, the wagon creaking under the weight of new lumber. Verena stood waiting near the gate, lantern in hand. "You took your time." "Road was soft near the creek," he said, climbing down. "Didn't want to break a wheel." She lifted the lantern, light catching his face. "You look like you haven't eaten all day." "I did," he said. "But it wasn't as good as this morning's bread." She didn't smile, not quite, but her shoulders eased. Supper's on the stove, stew and cornbread. Inside, the children were already asleep, curled up in one bed with a patchwork quilt pulled to their chins. Verena ladled food into a tin bowl and passed it to Dawson without fuss. He sat at the table, boots still dusted from the road. "You ever think about returning east?" she asked after a stretch of silence. He shook his head. "Nothing waiting for me there. No family, none I care to find." She poured herself a cup of coffee from the kettle. "You don't talk much about what came before. No reason to." She sat across from him, hands wrapped around her cup. "I think it matters. Knowing where someone's been," he met her eyes. "I've been through dry years and worse company. I've walked away from things I shouldn't have, but I don't run anymore, not since coming here." Her fingers tightened around the tin. "Did you ever lose something and not realize how much it meant until it was too late?" "I did," he said, "but I never got a second chance." Verena looked toward the back window. The wind had risen again, brushing the shutter in slow rhythm. "I never expected anyone to stay." "Not after Levy." "I'm not him," Dawson said. "I know." He stood, set the bowl in the basin, and turned to face her fully. "But I don't leave when the wind turns mean, and I don't make promises I won't keep." She crossed to the hearth, added a stick of wood to the low fire. "What would you promise if you could?" "That I'll finish the barn. That I'll keep Declan out of trouble and teach Daisy to ride straight. That I'll stay as long as you'll keep letting me." The fire cracked between them, light dancing up her sleeve. "You've only been here a month." "I know." She didn't move, didn't speak. He waited. Then, quiet as dusk, she said, "I think you should build the barn with a loft for sleeping." He stepped closer. "You want me to move inside, I want you warm come winter. And close enough to hear if I call out." Dawson reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I'll build it strong," he said. "I know." Outside, the wind carried the scent of turned earth and pine. Inside, the fire held steady, and for the first time in a long while, so did she. The barn rose slowly, one beam at a time. Dawson measured and sawed with a quiet deliberateness, every joint notched by hand, every nail driven straight. Declan held boards steady while Dawson worked the hammer, and Verena watched from the field with Daisy balanced on her hip, eyes narrowed against the sun. She didn't offer instructions, just stood there, steady, like she was trying to memorize the way the roofline grew against the sky. By the second week of October, the loft was framed. Dawson left a hatch open on the northern wall for air and cut two narrow windows just under the eaves. Verena didn't ask what he planned to use them for, didn't need to. She'd seen him carry his bedroll and rifle up the ladder, then come back down with his coat dusted in sawdust and his jaw set with quiet purpose. The nights had turned colder, and the mornings smelled of frost. One evening, as the wind dropped low and the fire crackled in the hearth, Verena sat stitching a tear in Daisy's sleeve while Dawson sanded the edge of a shutter that had warped in the rain. "Where'd you learn carpentry like that?" she asked, eyes on the needle. He glanced up from the wood. "Worked freight lines through Missouri in my 20s. Wagons don't hold if you don't know how to brace a frame." "Is that where you're from?" "No," he said. "Born in Arkansas, but I left before I could grow roots." She nodded, adjusting her grip. "You ever want to go back?" "Not once." She folded the finished sleeve and laid it over the back of the chair. "I think about leaving sometimes, not for good, just for the day, just to see what's out there." He set the shutter aside. "Where would you go?" "West," she said. "Not for the gold or the rail, just to see the ocean." Levy wanted to once, but there was always another season, another calf, another storm. "You still want to go?" "Not like I used to." "I think I wanted to prove I could want something bigger than the next harvest." Dawson stood and walked to where she sat. "You still can." She looked up at him, the firelight warming the curve of her cheek. "Not alone." "You're not," he said. She drew a breath, slow and sure. "You ever think about staying past the winter?" He crouched beside her, resting one hand on the edge of the chair. "I already built a loft with my name on it." She smiled, not cautious, not hidden. "That's not the same as saying yes." "I'm saying yes," he said gently. "If you're asking," her hand settled over his. "I am." The next morning, she rose before the rooster and started the stove before the sky turned pale. Dawson came in from the yard with a bucket of milk and a line of frost across his collar. She poured coffee without asking and handed it to him with both hands. "I was thinking," she said, watching the steam rise, "we could plant potatoes in the lower field come spring." He took the cup. "So long as you don't ask me to name each one," she laughed, quiet and real. "Only the ones that grow straight." He leaned against the counter, the warmth from the stove soaking through his coat. "You ever name the chickens?" "The children did," she said. "That's why one's called Boots and another's just named Chicken." The floor creaked as he shifted his weight. "You ever think about getting more livestock? If we can build a pen come March, maybe a milk cow?" She paused. "And someone to barter for salt licks." "I can ride down to Mill Gulch for that," he offered. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You always offer before I ask. Only when it matters." Outside, the wind carried the sound of dry leaves across the porch. Inside, the quiet between them felt full, like something planted deep had finally taken root. Later that day, Dawson lifted Daisy onto the fence rail while Verena and Declan drove the goats into the shed ahead of the first snow. Verena glanced back once, just once, and saw Dawson steadying Daisy's back with one hand while she reached for a low branch. It wasn't just that he was gentle, it was that he remembered. He paid attention in the way only someone who had known loss could. That night, Verena stepped onto the porch alone. She didn't speak to the grave. She stood beside it, eyes on the stars, and let the silence answer her. She didn't feel guilty, not anymore. Inside, Dawson sat carving something small from a strip of pine. When she came in, he looked up, not surprised, not expectant. Just ready, she crossed the floor, knelt beside him, and opened her hand. He set the carved shape in her palm, a thimble, smoothed and rounded, just the size of her fingertip. She looked at it for a long time before saying, "You made this for me." "I did." She closed her fingers around it, then she leaned in and kissed him once, soft and sure. When she pulled back, she said, "You're not him, but you're mine now." Dawson nodded. "Yes," he said. "I am." The snow came early that year, quiet and heavy. It fell in the night and covered the fields in a white hush that made the world look softer than it was. Dawson rose before first light, shook the frost from the porch rail, and started the stove before the house stirred. By the time Verena stepped into the kitchen, wrapped in one of her heavier shawls, The smell of corn mush and chicory was already filling the room. "You're spoiling us," she said, rubbing warmth into her arms. Dawson poured her a cup and handed it over without a word. He'd been rising earlier each day, clearing the path to the well, feeding the goats, checking the roof beams for sag. The barn had held strong through the wind that came with the first snow, and the loft stayed dry. Verena leaned against the counter and watched him eat. After a while, she said, "I found the deed." He looked up. "It was in the bottom of Levy's trunk," she said. "He'd tucked it under some old ledgers. I thought it was gone after the fire. You planned to keep it in the same place?" "I was thinking it should go where we keep our things now." He set his spoon down. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't." He reached for her hand across the table. She gave it to him, no hesitation. "I've been thinking about the rest of the field," she said. "The far patch near the ridge, I want to try oats." Dawson nodded. "That soil's ready. Just needs turning come thaw." "Would you," she paused, eyes narrowing just a little, "mind putting your name on the next land filing with mine?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, crossed the floor, and opened the drawer where the ink bottle and blank papers were kept. He pulled out the pen, uncorked the ink, and dipped the nib. "Tell me how you want it written," he said. They filed it with the notary in Helena 2 weeks later, with the children bundled in the back of the wagon and Verena's hand tucked into Dawson's coat the whole way there. The clerk took one look at the signature and raised an eyebrow. "You two married?" Verena glanced at Dawson. "Not yet." The clerk scratched his chin. "Well, this'll bind you tighter than a preacher can." "That's the idea," Dawson said. They built the wedding day small. Just the 4 of them and the pastor from the mission school who came out once a season to check on the valley children. Verena wore her mother's brooch pinned at her collar. Dawson shaved for the first time in a month and wore the shirt Verena had stitched a new cuff onto after the fire. Declan held the rings. Daisy carried a bundle of dried sage and prairie grass. The pastor asked the words. They spoke them plain. There was no music, no ribbon, no guests. Just the sound of the children giggling as the wind tugged at their coats, and the way Verena looked at Dawson like she could see every step that had brought them here. After the pastor left, they ate fried potatoes and apple preserves at the table, and Dawson lifted Daisy onto his shoulders while Verena cleaned the last of the dishes. Later, when the children had gone to bed and the fire had burned low, Verena stepped into the loft where Dawson had laid out 2 quilts and her favorite shawl. She stood at the edge of the bed and said, "I never thought I'd have this again." "You didn't get it again," he said. "You made it new." She leaned into him, her fingers at the collar of his shirt. "You're warm." "I always will be," he said. "For you, winter settled in, but the house never grew cold." Dawson fixed the window panes and lined the sills with wool. Verena taught Daisy to mend seams while Declan learned to read by firelight. By late February, Dawson had started drawing plans for a smokehouse, and Verena was teaching herself how to make soap from the lard they rendered after butchering. They traded eggs for salt from the family downriver and planned to take in a second goat from the neighbor who couldn't winter all 4. One evening, while Dawson and Declan were building a sled from old barrel staves, Verena stood at the doorway, arms folded, watching them work. "We ever figure out what to name the new goat?" she asked. Daisy tugged her sleeve. "I want to name her Snow." "Snow it is," Verena said, brushing hair from her daughter's eyes. That night, Dawson pulled Verena close beneath the quilts, his hand resting gently over hers. "You miss the road?" she asked softly. "Not once," he said. "You afraid of staying?" "No," he said. "I'm afraid I'll forget what it was like before you, and I don't want to." She turned into him, her breath warm against his neck. "We'll remember together." In spring, they sowed oats in the ridge patch. Verena walked behind the plow, dropping seed while Dawson guided the mare. The children chased sparrows between the rows. The air smelled of turned earth and sun-warmed pine. Before the season ended, a letter came from Helena. The land filing had been approved, Dawson's name printed beside hers in neat black ink. They framed it, hung it above the mantel, and never spoke of it as anything less than a promise. They did not chase after more than what they had. They did not need to. Their days stretched long and golden, their nights quiet and good. And when the years turned, they turned together.